In the northern edge of Montana, where pine forests claw at the sky and winter winds cut like broken glass, there is a lake almost no one remembers anymore, a lake that locals once whispered about, a lake that now sits abandoned behind rusted fencing and warning signs that have long since lost their paint. They called it Wintermouth Lake, and even before the government sealed it off, people rarely approached it willingly. The water was always too dark, too still, reflecting the world like a sheet of black glass. On moonless nights, it didn't even reflect the sky. It seemed to swallow it. Tourists said it felt wrong. Fishermen said the water had weight, and hikers avoided it without knowing why until the disappearances began. The first missing person was a teenage boy named Eric Hammond, an adventurous kid who often snuck out to explore the forest. He vanished while kayaking on the lake at dawn. The sheriff's department found his kayak floating upright. Not overturned, not damaged, just drifting across the surface as if placed there deliberately. There were no drag marks, no footprints, no signs of struggle. People assumed he drowned until the second disappearance, then the third, then the fourth. Hikers, campers, tourists, even local wildlife trackers. No bodies ever washed up. Search divers reported strange currents pulling downward, even though the lake was only 70 feet deep. Sonar showed nothing. But the part that truly frightened them, the reason the lake was closed forever, was that the deeper teams reported hearing knocking sounds in the dark. Beneath them, rhythmic tapping on their metal tanks as if something blind and enormous was exploring them by sound alone. Every year afterward, the lake grew more forgotten. But monsters don't starve when people disappear. They wait, they learn, and they grow hungrier. When the government finally fenced it off with nitrogen monoxide trespassing signs in 1998, most people obeyed. But one person didn't, a wildlife documentarian named Daniel Crowe, who built his entire career on sneaking into off-limits places to film truth they don't want you to see. Wintermouth Lake became his obsession after he found old police tapes of search divers describing something massive and silent moving just out of sight, and a retired sheriff mentioning that the lake wasn't always like that, and that the darkness in it felt new, as if something came into it, not out of it. Daniel wanted proof, video, audio, anything. His channel was dying, his views dropping, and he needed one big discovery to revive his career. Monsters, even rumors of monsters, always sold well. So Daniel, armed with 3 waterproof cameras, a drone, sound equipment, and his old aluminum boat, cut through the fence one cold October evening. Snow powdered the pines, winds scraped across the empty shoreline, and the lake ahead looked like an oil spill reflecting the moon. Daniel filmed everything: the gate, the fence, the warning signs, the broken ranger station. "Wintermouth Lake," he whispered into the camera. "Closed since 1998. Tonight we find out why." He pushed the boat into the water. The moment it touched the surface, the metal of the hull made a muffled echo, as if the lake swallowed sound itself. Daniel paddled forward, and within minutes the shore disappeared behind rising mist. He turned on his underwater microphones. Instead of silence, he heard an impossibly deep humming sound beneath him, like a huge metal cable vibrating miles underground. "That's not geological," he muttered. "Something's moving." He dropped his first underwater camera. It sank slowly, its faint light carving a thin tunnel through the dark water. Then halfway down it stopped sinking. Daniel frowned, checking the line. It wasn't caught on anything. It was suspended as if something held it in place. Then the camera began to drift sideways. Daniel froze, gripping the boat's edge. The camera jerked sharply and the line snapped, a clean break as if cut by a blade. Something brushed the underside of the boat hard enough to make the hull click. The lake grew still again, but Daniel wasn't ready to leave. Instead, he powered on the drone and sent it upward for a shot of the lake from above. But when the drone reached 100 feet, he noticed something terrifying on the screen. Shadows in the water. Not reflections. Shapes. Long, thick serpentine shadows moving just below the surface, circling his boat. Daniel's breath shook. He zoomed in. The shapes moved with slow, deliberate grace, like they were confident, patient, studying him. He lowered his second underwater camera, and within seconds it recorded something mind-shattering. Rows of teeth, not like a shark's but layered in spirals, rotating slightly as they opened and closed, feeling their surroundings. The creature wasn't just a predator, it was built to sense water vibrations, sound, even heartbeats. Daniel whispered into the recorder, This is impossible. Nothing this size should exist in fresh water. Then the humming returned, louder this time, vibrating through the boat's floor. Daniel could feel it in his ribs. Something massive was rising beneath him. The drone above showed ripples forming a perfect circle around the boat, as if the lake itself were opening. A huge shadow rose beneath him, the size of a bus, maybe bigger. Daniel fumbled with the camera, zooming in, whispering, Please let this be filming. And then he saw it. An eye. Not a fish eye, not a reptile eye. This one was unnervingly human-shaped, huge, foggy white with a vertical scar across it. The creature turned its head as it rose, and Daniel realized with horror that the surface distortion wasn't to ripples. It was the creature's back breaking through water, covered in skin like wet stone. The boat rocked violently. Daniel grabbed the sides, shouting into the camera, oh God, it's under me. The eye blinked, and the humming stopped. For one heartbeat, the lake was silent, and then the boat launched upward, thrown by an enormous force from below. Daniel flew into the air, screaming, the camera spinning, the drone capturing everything. When he hit the water, the cold shock stole his breath instantly. He kicked upward, desperate, grabbing at nothing. But the lake had already changed. The water felt thicker, heavy. Something brushed his legs, smooth, massive, stretching wider than he could imagine. Daniel tried to swim, but the lake felt like hands dragging him down. He surfaced once, gasping, shouting, Help! Someone! And then something coiled around his torso slowly, almost curiously pulling him beneath the surface. The drone recorded his last scream as he vanished into the black, his sound swallowed instantly. The drone hovered until its battery died and fell into the lake. Authorities found Daniel's abandoned truck a week later, then discovered the cut fence, then found his boat smashed against the rocks with deep gouges in the metal as if something with teeth had tested it. They also recovered Daniel's last camera lodged in the reach. The footage stopped after his boat flipped, but the audio carried 3 haunting sounds before the tape cut out. The humming, a long dragging scrape under the water, and something that sounded like a gurgled exhale, too deep, too wet, too large to be human. Wintermouth Lake was resealed, fenced again, and surrounded by motion sensors. But locals swear that on certain winter nights when the fog sinks low and the forest goes quiet, you can still hear the humming rising from the lake, vibrating through the frozen air, calling out as if searching for something it lost. They say the creature remembers Daniel's heartbeat. They say it waits for him. They say it knows we're still watching. And worst of all, they say it's not alone anymore.